What's up, everyone? We are diving back into the multiverse today for another epic. What if Naruto became Hellfire Reaper after death and built powerful harem with Haku, Hinata and Anko? Part 1. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Excuse me, sir, you are resting on the herbs I need. Ocean Blue eyes opened drowsily at the sound of the voice coming from above him, and once they focused, the sight of a pale girl, no older than himself, was staring down at him. Uzumaki Naruto had just spent the entire night trying to walk up the bloody tree he was currently leaned upon, and while he succeeded, he was plumb tired from it. Naruto's face heated up from how pretty the girl was. Her chocolate brown eyes seemed to shine with warmth unfamiliar to him, and add to the fact her onyx black hair was cascading around her shoulders, the bright green leaves from the trees behind her, and the beams of sunlight coming through said leaves, he thought he had died and gone to heaven. Wow, your verse is very beautiful, Naruto stammered out, the blush on his face darkening significantly. The girl's face tinged pink from the compliment. Thank you Shinobi-san, she murmured, tripping up on her words, clearly taken by surprise by the compliment, but then she smiled. Naruto laughed nervously and raised up from his resting spot and stretched out his limbs. So, what are you doing out here all by yourself? Naruto asked after he lowered his arms. The mysterious woman explained that she was getting herbs for her wounded father. Well then, how about I help you out? No sense in leaving someone as beautiful as you to handle this alone, Naruto stated with a kind smile on his face, which caused the girl to return his smile shyly, pink returning to her cheeks. What is your name? Naruto pointed at his own chest with his thumb and said with a proud tone, I am Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha Shinobi and the most unpredictable being on this planet. And what is your name? The female merely smiled up at him and said, Haku, Haku is my name and I'm just a simple flower girl from Wave Village of Wave Timeskip. One day later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. Why did you become a shinobi, Naruto-san? Naruto glanced at Haku's curious face. The two of them were currently sitting on the edge of a dock when Haku decided to ask this question out of the blue. Naruto opened his mouth to give her the standard answer he gives anyone that asked that question. So I could become the Hokage. That way, everyone would have to acknowledge me. But Naruto closed his mouth and stared out at the ocean before him. At first, that was his reason. He wanted to become a shinobi and then the Hokage because he was tired of being ignored and being treated as some freak. He knew the reason why everyone treated him this way now, but that didn't mean anything to him. He wanted to prove that he was not the Kyuubi no Kitsune to Konoha, and that is why he was a shinobi. But now things were different. He still wanted to be acknowledged by his village, but now that was no longer the driving point of his shinobi career. But what was his reason if not that? I honestly don't know anymore, Naruto replied with a small sigh leaving his lips. At first, I just wanted to be seen as me, instead of the outcast of my village, but lately, I just feel lost. He saw Haku frown from the corner of his eye and silently, he felt her soft hands touch his face before they turned his head to face her. Naruto-san, don't you have someone precious to you? Someone that you would be willing to fight and to die for? Haku asked softly. Naruto narrowed his eyes in thought before he replied, well, not really, I'm the outcast in my village. Everyone hates me for something I couldn't control, I don't really have anyone to fight for. Let alone die for. He could tell that Haku was not pleased with his words, but he was being honest with her. Sure, he had some friends, but they weren't really there for him when he needed them. And one could say Iruka or Konohamaru, but Iruka could always defend himself and Konohamaru was the Hokage's grandson. They didn't need anyone fighting or dying for them. Naruto-san, maybe that is why you feel lost. You feel as if you don't have a purpose, Haku stated to him gently. Naruto nodded at this, finding truth in her words, but then he asked, then can you help me find my purpose? Haku seemed stunned by this question, but he then watched a tender smile form on her face. I'll be glad to assist. Village of Wave Timeskip 4 days later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto was walking around Tazuna's village with a large grin on his face. It had been 4 days since he met Haku, and so far, he had found himself really liking her. The two would meet up every day in the forest to collect herbs for her father and just talk for hours on end until his sensei and teammates came wandering out to start their training. He found himself telling her of all of his friends and fun times he had in Konoha, and each time he managed to get a laugh from her made his heart skip a beat. But while everything was going well for the two of them, Naruto still hadn't found that purpose Haku said he was missing. I won't give up hope though. I'll find my purpose sooner or later, Naruto said to himself with a grateful smile on his face. But that's when he happened to come across Haku handing out soup to some of the starving children in the village. Naruto watched her for a few seconds, clearly touched by the sight, and decided then and there to do something special. That's when Naruto noticed a large amount of many kinds of flowers growing in front of a long abandoned home and quickly went to work in pulling them out of the ground, cutting the roots off with his kunai. He hid the modest-sized impromptu bouquet behind his back and walked up behind Haku and said, "Hey." He watched as Haku jumped and instantly turned around a lot quicker than a regular girl should, but then when she saw him, Haku huffed and exclaimed, "Ah. Naruto-san. You scared me." Naruto smiled while Haku glared at him with a small pout. "Sorry, Haku-san. I couldn't help it. I don't get to scare people often," Naruto replied with a large grin on his face and a chuckle. He saw that Haku was about to speak, so without warning, he pulled the bouquet from his back and said, "For you." He saw Haku's eyes widen in shock at the flowers while all the children around them began to giggle and whisper amongst themselves about this turn of events. Wow, Naruto-san, what is this for? Haku asked him softly, her face red. "Well, I saw you feeding these kids and I decided you deserved something nice for doing it," Naruto replied with an earnest smile on his face. Haku gingerly took the flowers from his hands and held them in her arms, clearly unable to reply briefly before she said, "Thank you, Naruto-san. I didn't do this just to get a reward, I did this to be able to help these starving people, it was the right thing to do. I knew that, Haku-san, but still, I wanted to give you something to show my appreciation for you doing this," Naruto replied before he muttered, "I just wish someone had done this type of thing to me sooner." He knew Haku had heard his mutter due to the sadness that appeared in her eyes, but before she could commit, Naruto masked his own sadness with a large smile and said, "Move over, I'm going to help. No sense in leaving a pretty woman to do this all alone." Naruto realized right then and there that making Haku blush was going to be so much fun. Village of Wave timeskip. 1 week later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. It's nice of you to walk with me on this night, Naruto-san, Haku told him with a small smile on her face, her hands clasped behind her back while Naruto's hands were comfortable in his orange jumper's pockets. Naruto snorted at her words and responded, "When a beautiful girl asks if you wanna walk with them, you say, yes, in an instant. That's what my friend Kiba always told me." He heard Haku giggle beside him and he couldn't help but blush at the sweet-sounding music she had just made. "If you continue to flatter me, Naruto-san, I might start to believe it." Naruto instantly turned his head in alarm. She didn't find herself beautiful. "You must be kidding, Haku-san. You are very beautiful. Who would lie about something like that?" Naruto asked, his tone showing no amusement in her words. Naruto watched as Haku's pace slowed to a stop as she lowered her head and said, "You'd be surprised." Naruto didn't know what compelled him to do what he did, but before he could stop himself, his hand gently caressed her cheek before he tilted her head up, forcing her to look into his eyes. "I am surprised because they must be blind as bats, I mean look at you. Silky, long black hair, pale skin, huge warm brown eyes, and not to mention how nice you are. You are very beautiful," Naruto told her genuinely. "Why you continue to flatter?" Haku muttered, but Naruto wouldn't let her finish. "I'm not trying to flatter you, Haku-san. I only speak the truth. I mean seriously. You're not only beautiful on the outside, you're beautiful on the inside as well. Ever since I met you, you have been doing nice things. Getting herbs for your father, feeding the kids of the village every single day, and not to mention keeping the children's spirits up when stuff is going bad. You are amazing." I don't feel amazing. I've done a lot of terrible things for my precious person. I just want to do something good for once, Haku stammered softly, making Naruto frown a bit. What did Haku do that was so bad? Naruto shook his head. It didn't matter to him what she had done in the past. She was trying to make up for it now, and that was all that mattered. Hey, it doesn't matter. You did some bad stuff in the past. I don't know how bad it was, but you being here and doing good is all that matters, Naruto said with a gentle smile on his face. Naruto could see how grateful she was for his words in her eyes, which were now shining with unshed tears of happiness. Thank you, Naruto-kun, Haku whispered before she leaned up and kissed his cheek, making the blonde blush wildly, but he could not wipe the smile from his face. It's no problem, Haku-chan. Now come on, I can't wait for you to meet my team, Naruto murmured softly before he and Haku started to walk back toward Tazuna's house. But this time, Haku's hand slowly grasped his own, causing him to look at her with a large grin on his face, which she returned with a shy smile. But as he looked at her, he felt something in his heart shift to unknown territories. But what did this mean? Village of Wave timeskip 2 weeks later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. And that's the last bowl of soup for today, Naruto said with a kind smile on his face as he handed over the final bowl to a small little girl in torn clothes. The little girl took the bowl and gave Naruto a small hug around his waist and said, "Thank you, Whisker-kun." Naruto smiled and patted her head gently. "It's no problem at all. Gotta keep my favorite gal well fed." The little girl's face lit up like a Christmas tree when he uttered those words, and with another hard hug, the little girl ran away, leaving Naruto and Haku alone. "You are too sweet, Naruto-kun," he heard Haku say from behind him. Naruto turned around and faced the smiling Haku and smiled at her words. "Aw shucks, I just wanted to bring some light to her day." "I'm glad it made her happy," Naruto replied while leaning on the wooden stand that Haku had created. He noticed a wide smile overcome Haku's, and it made a gentle smile appear on his face. "It seems it has made you happy as well," Naruto noted. "It is. These children have seen so much pain and suffering. To be able to brighten their day as you did makes me uncontrollably happy," Haku replied as she sat down and leaned on the other side of the wooden stand. Naruto remained silent for a few moments, his eyes gazing at the unfinished bridge that was nothing but a silhouette against the setting sun. She was right. These children had seen nothing short but pain and suffering when they were only supposed to know happiness and fun, and it wasn't just the children. Everyone in this village deserved to be happy, but instead, the ruthless tyrant had snuffed out their hope, their dreams, and for what? Money. Power. It didn't matter what the reason was. "Haku-chan," Naruto said suddenly, catching the attention of the girl across from him. "I realized what my purpose is, why I want to stay a shinobi." From the serious look in Haku's eyes, he could tell that he got her attention, and that alone gave him the strength to continue. "This village has been suffering because of Gato and his army, having to bend to his rules and live under fear. And for those who refused, like Kazuma, were killed to set an example." Naruto turned away from her to gaze at the unfinished bridge and said with a soft tone, "Despite him being a shifty old drunk, Tazuna was the only one brave enough to want to see this village shine with hope and love again. He, and all of those who are building that bridge, are fighting against Gato to bring light back to this place. Despite the dangers, the purpose I had before was selfish and only benefited me, but now I want to be that light." Naruto then turned back to Haku, who had a mixture of happiness and sadness on her face, and said, "I want to be the light that ends the suffering, not only for this village or even my own, but for the world. I want to be the light that shines even through the darkest of nights. That is my purpose." "That is a wonderful purpose, Naruto-kun. I'm proud that you took up such a noble purpose," Haku said to him softly. Naruto blushed at her words and gingerly took her hands into his and said, "But I can't do it alone. I want you to help me bring that light as well." Naruto knew Haku was surprised by his words, but instead of a look of happiness, Haku lowered her head and whispered, "I don't think I could be the light you want me to be." Naruto saw a small tear escape her eyes and trail down her cheek, and slowly, he brought up his left hand to wipe it away with a small frown on his face. "Anyone can do good in the world, Haku-chan. It doesn't matter what happened in the past," Naruto told her gently. He watched as Haku looked up at him with a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes as she asked, "Do you really think so? Do you really think I could be redeemed for all the pain I've caused?" "I do," Naruto replied instantly, brushing away another tear that strayed from her eye. Haku gave him a breathtaking smile that made his heart skip a beat, and that was when he realized the answer to another question Haku had asked. Naruto-san, don't you have someone precious to you? Someone that you would be willing to fight and to die for? I think I do, Haku-chan, and it's you, Naruto thought to himself before he took the plunge and pecked her lips softly. He felt her body seize up with shock the moment his lips connected with hers, but before he gave her the chance to do anything, he pulled away with reddened cheeks. Neither of them said a word for what seemed like a lifetime before he noticed that a soft smile began to form on her face, and just as he did before, she leaned up and kissed his lips, returning his affections. Village of Wave timeskip 1 week later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. Haku-chan, I won't be able to help with the food stand tomorrow, Naruto whispered sullenly as he stared up at the crisp clear night sky, a frown on his face. Haku, who had her head resting on his shoulder and her hand in his, remained silent. Despite only knowing her for 2 weeks and some change, he was able to read her like an open book, and he could tell she was really upset about something. She had been like this since the moment she showed up, and no matter what Naruto said or did, she wouldn't open up to him at all. So instead of waiting for her to respond, Naruto whispered, I should be glad you know. When that scroll was delivered, my team was excited because all of this would be over and we would finally be able to go home, and yet. I'm not happy at all. Naruto sighed as he felt Haku's grip on his hand tighten, but that didn't stop his words. You have no idea how happy I have been here. Sure, I miss Konoha, but here, I didn't feel like I wasn't wanted. Everyone, from the adults that joked around with me while my clones and I worked on the bridge, to the little kids that we fed, to you, all of you guys have been amazing to me, but once we defeat Zabuza and his partner, I'll have to leave here, leave you. It was then that Naruto felt Haku move away from him in order to stand on her 2 feet, still completely silent. For a moment, he thought he had said something wrong. That he was going to scare her away, but when he saw her shoulders shaking and heard a sob leave her lips, he knew he had said the wrong thing. But as he stood up after her, Haku said, I don't want you to go tomorrow. Naruto felt his heart clench up at how upset she sounded, but Naruto knew that this conversation would only get worse, so he had to power through it. I can't let my teammates down. They need me there, Naruto responded, his hand reaching out to Haku's shoulder, but the next words she said stopped him cold in his tracks. You don't understand, I don't want to fight you. Haku, what do you mean by that? Naruto questioned, clearly not understanding what she was trying to say. Fight him? Why did she not want to fight him? Tomorrow, he would be fighting Zabuza and his partner. What did she have to do with it? No, Naruto whispered, her words finally hitting him. Please, don't tell me, Naruto gasped out, his heart aching in both sorrow and terror as he stared at Haku's back. I have done a lot of bad things for my precious person, Haku started, without turning back to look at the genin. Zabuza-sama took me in when my real father killed my mother and tried to kill me because of my Kekkei Genkai. He gave me purpose, and all I ever wanted was to be his tool. I wanted to fight for his ideals and his dreams, to die if he ever needed it of me, Haku told him with a shaky voice, trying to keep the sobs at bay. Naruto couldn't believe this. Haku, the very same Haku he had been kissing and cuddling and helping feed the children day in and day out, was Zabuza's accomplice. The very same accomplice that he would be fighting tomorrow. Why didn't you tell me? Naruto asked her, a look of hurt on his face. Haku turned around to reveal the tears pouring down her face, causing Naruto's face to morph into a frown. I couldn't. No matter how many times I wanted to tell you, I couldn't. I was scared of hurting you. Haku fell to her knees and sobbed into her hands. I didn't want any of this. I didn't ask for my heart to be taken by my master's enemy, and yet here I am. Kneeling before my enemy, my heart solely in his hands. I've never been terrified like this before. I want to obey Zabuza-sama, but I'm scared that I might have to kill you. Without stopping himself, Naruto's arms found themselves wrapping around Haku's slim form as she began to break down against him, his wet face burying itself against his neck and her arms wrapped around him as well. Please, she uttered against his neck. Don't go to the bridge, I don't want you to die, I've already lost so much, I can't lose you as well. But Naruto knew that despite her pleas, he couldn't abandon his team. Taking a breath, Naruto said, I don't want to fight you either and I don't want you to die, but I can't allow myself to turn my back on my team. In the same way, I'm sure you can't turn your back on Zabuza, he saved you from possible death. That outweighs how you feel about me. Haku pulled away from him just enough that she was looking at him in his eyes and said, that's not true. Naruto-kun, I love you. I hate myself for feeling this way, but I do. You have made the past 2 weeks colorful compared to how dull my life had been before. Zabuza gave me a purpose, but you gave me love I thought I would never have. Naruto laughed sadly and replied, and my luck couldn't have been better. I finally find that person I would risk it all for before I have to fight her. I don't know what to do anymore, Haku-chan. I can't abandon my team, but I can't fight you. I can't fight the person I love. It seems fate wants this to happen, Naruto told her with a broken look on his face. Then, if this is our fate, then I want us to be together, to be one, at least this one time, and not a second later, Naruto found her lips claiming his in a hard, desperate kiss. Naruto was blown away by his first kiss. Sasuke will never count, but he returned the kiss to match her desperation. Naruto then found himself falling to the ground with Haku on top of them, and then everything became a blur filled with the sounds of breathy moans, intense emotions, and feelings that neither of them thought they could ever have. And by the end of this rush of wild emotions, the gnawed forms of Naruto and Haku rested side by side, their arms wrapped around each other and her head resting against his chest. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will always love you, Naruto-kun, Haku breathed out softly, her fingers intertwined with his own. And I will always love you, Haku-chan, Naruto whispered. And no matter what happens tomorrow, the both of us will walk away alive, and together, Naruto thought to himself as held her close to his body, a look of determination on his face. Village of Wave timeskip 5 hours later. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. The battle at the bridge had been an intense one from the get-go. Sasuke and Haku fought one-on-one while Kakashi and Zabuza did the same, leaving Sakura to guard the fearful Tazuna. Sasuke had awakened his dojutsu, the Sharingan, and actually had an edge against Haku until she used her Kekkei Genkai to form the demon ice mirrors around him. It was then Naruto leapt into the fray. The intense battle between Sasuke and Haku had suddenly become more somber and heartbreaking as Haku said, "You have arrived, Naruto-kun. I was a little late, but I couldn't let the Tem here fight you, Haku-chan," Naruto responded softly, ignoring the look of shock on Sasuke's face when he said her name. "Dope. This is Haku. The same Haku that has eaten with us dozens of times?" Sasuke asked in horror, his hands shaking in terror. "The very same Tem, but you no longer need to fight her. I will take over from here," Naruto replied, his gaze leaving Haku's to glance at his teammate. "I don't even want to know how this came to be, but I can't leave you here on your own, dope," Sasuke said as he tugged a Senbon out of his arm before he added, "She's too tough for even me to deal with alone, let alone you." "Sasuke, please," Naruto asked again, his voice tinged in desperation. Sasuke seemed to get the hint, plus Naruto actually said his name for once, telling him how serious this was, and made his way out of the mirrors, and to his surprise, Haku actually let him out of her jutsu. Naruto turned to the image of Haku that was in the mirror near the top of the dome and said, "Don't hold back, because I won't." Haku nodded and pulled out 3 Senbon, and with that, the battle was on. For 10 agonizing minutes, Naruto had to withstand that storm of Senbon that kept coming his way, and no matter how many clones he threw at her, she was just too fast for him, but he didn't give up. Because he had a plan. Outside of this dome, 10 of his clones stood to watch over Zabuza and Kakashi's battle, and from what Iruka had told him about his clones is that any time one was killed, any information they saw would return to him. So now it was time to use this to his advantage. He was going to have the clones kill one another whenever something big happened during the Kakashi and Zabuza fight, while drawing out his fight as well, so if Zabuza was killed and she was still fighting him, Haku would have no reason to fight him and they could walk out together. He knew that what he was doing was underhanded, but this was the only way he could keep them both alive. But after 10 minutes of this, Naruto fell to his knees, dozens of Senbons sticking out of his body, his own blood flowing from the needles and onto the bridge beneath him. Please Naruto-kun, don't stand up, he heard Haku plead as his breathing came out hoarse and weak. Slowly, Naruto forced himself onto his feet and panted heavily. I'm not done yet, Naruto growled out weakly, his entire body shaking from the pain he was in, but he would not allow himself to give in yet. Keep going, Naruto commanded, his vision blurring briefly before straightening out to reveal Haku charging towards him, 3 Senbon clenched in her fists. Naruto leapt forward, summoned a clone, which pushed him away, and took the Senbons in the chest, leaving the real Naruto free to punch Haku in the jaw as hard as humanly possible, causing her mask to crack. Naruto and Haku both slammed to the ground, neither of them willing to move. One out of the pain of many needles in his body, and the other being unable to continue this fight further. Naruto forced himself up to his knees and started to tug the various Senbon out of his body while Haku continued to lie on the bridge, not bothering to move. Naruto turned to Haku and pushed himself up to his feet but stumbled back to the ground hard. Well, this isn't looking too good, Naruto groaned out as he pushed himself off the bridge. His legs were a bit numb but Naruto would force himself through it. Suddenly, an image of 2 dogs holding Zabuza by the arms while Kakashi prepared some type of jutsu appeared in his head and it made Naruto grin slightly. He just had to stall just a little bit longer. Naruto got back on his feet and took 3 stumbling steps forward to Haku before he fell down to one knee, but he was close enough to hear sobbing coming from behind her mask. Haku-chan, Naruto said while he reached out to her and removed her mask, revealing her tear-streaked face. I couldn't do it, Haku said immediately, not caring if her mask was removed from her face. Zabuza-sama told me to kill you but I couldn't kill you at all. I failed him but I am happy that I failed him, and that makes it so much worse. Haku then turned to Naruto and asked, if I can't even obey my master's orders, how could ever help you in your cause to bring light to this world? Naruto could see how torn up she was about her love for him and her loyalty to her master. She looked so lost and scared that it made his heart hurt. The sounds of chirping birds were heard echoing from the mist that was cast over the bridge, and an image of Kakashi holding what looked like a damn ball of lightning in his right hand appeared in his head. Haku! Zabuza suddenly shouted, causing Haku to clench her eyes shut, her hands covering most of her face. Don't go Haku-chan, Naruto said with a look of fear on his face, knowing that deep down, he wouldn't be able to stop her. I have to do it, I can't let him die, Haku muttered with a sad smile on her face. Naruto felt her cold hands brush up against his cheek. Maybe it's better this way, I can fulfill my promise to be a better tool, and to make sure that you stay alive, Haku whispered before Naruto felt her whisk past him as quickly as possible. No, I can't let that happen. Naruto thought wildly as he twisted his body and attempted to run, but he found himself slamming to the ground hard. Damn it! Naruto shouted angrily as he slammed his fist against the concrete below him. He couldn't allow her to die. This world needed kind-hearted people like her in it. He was just the village pariah who everyone hated. He had no future. He had nothing. What kind of man would he be if he couldn't keep the woman he loved alive? I need to get up. Naruto screamed as his fist slammed against the ground again, anger continuing to pour into his veins. He needed to get up as soon as possible, and nothing, not even his own body, was going to make him quit. With a roar filled with raw determination, Naruto felt a fiery burst of chakra fill his veins. The Senbon that was trapped in his legs exploded from his body, and the numb feeling he had in his legs was no longer there. Like a bat out of hell, Naruto charged through the mist at such a high speed, his feet were gliding over the ground. The sound of the chirping birds was growing louder to his ears, but it sounded like it was moving as well. Almost there. I have to stop it. Naruto raged within his head as he pushed his speed to the highest level until his eyes gazed upon the image of Haku, standing in front of the limp-armed Zabuza as Kakashi's lightning-covered hand aimed at Haku's chest. Just one more push, Naruto thought as a burst of chakra managed to get him between the arm and Haku herself. Naruto had no time to breathe a sigh of relief, however, because a searing pain shattered his right shoulder blade all the way to his chest. Oh my god, Naruto! His sensei screamed into his ear in horror at what he had just done, but Naruto didn't care. All he was concerned about was Haku, who seemed to be horrified at him being in front of her at that time. Barely made it. Naruto wheezed out, blood dribbling from his mouth as he gave a weak smile to the nuke nin before him. Naruto then felt the arm within his body being forcibly pulled out of his body, forcing his body to fall back to the ground with a wet, disgusting smacking sound. No, Naruto-kun. Haku screamed in horror as she fell to Naruto's side, tears pouring out of her eyes at the fact that Naruto had taken the bullet for her. Why did you do this? She demanded angrily, her hands clenching his torn orange jumpsuit. N needed to do it, Naruto wheezed out weakly, his eyes trying to keep focused on the teen before him. Haku's forehead met his bloody jacket as she screamed his name in agony. Naruto was grateful for the loud scream because he was just going to drift off. Kakashi, sensei, sorry, Naruto panted out, his eyes pupils fading in and out as he tried to stay as long as possible. Why did you do it, Naruto? Kakashi asked solemnly, unable to understand why he had done what he did. For the enemy to boot. Haku-chan, love, her, Naruto stated with a weak smile on his face, his skin now becoming pale. She, nay, needed to stay, alive. She was ttt torn between her love of me and her loyalty to Zabu, za. Naruto-kun, why you selfless fool? Haku shouted angrily and helplessly as she looked at his bloody, pale face. My life is meaningless. I failed Zabuza-sama, I failed you, I am a failure in every meaning of the word. Why sacrifice your life for me? A worthless tool. Why Naruto-kun? You deserved your life more than I ever did. Haku would have continued to rant if not for Naruto placing a hand on top of her head, causing her to stop speaking immediately. What good wou would I be, if I let my precious, son die? Naruto breathed out with a smile before he leaned his head back and let out a final breath. The last thing his eyes laid upon was the blue sky above. Unknown location. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. What good wou would I be, if I let my precious, son die? Naruto breathed out with a smile before he leaned his head back and let out a final breath. The last thing his eyes laid upon was the blue sky above. Hearing the water crashing around him as he lay on the wet sand beneath him, Naruto opened his right eye and groaned in pain, forcing his body to cooperate with what he needed by getting to his feet. Rising to his feet, Naruto was surprised to feel that the injuries he sustained from earlier were no longer there, but as he truly looked around, he felt something was wrong with this scene. While the sun itself was glowing a faint fiery orange in the middle of the sky color itself was a midnight blue, but the stars above were also fiery orange. It was like staring at fireflies. He had to admit, despite knowing something was wrong, he enjoyed the sight of the world around him. The lake was crystal blue and the sand beneath his feet was white and not too hot, and the island itself was very lush and green. But where am I? Naruto asked himself. You are in my domain, Uzumaki Naruto. Hearing the unknown voice, Naruto turned to see a man with medium-length black hair along with a medium-sized beard, but the thing Naruto noticed the most was the yellow and black garb that the man wore. Come, join me in having some tea, the man told him, motioning the genin over with a motion of his head. Naruto walked over to the sitting man and sat down across from him and said, thanks. I didn't want to stand there too long. The man chuckled and poured Naruto some tea, which Naruto accepted and sipped. It tastes good, Naruto said with an approving smile on his face. It should. It was my mother's recipe, the man responded with a small chuckle. But I have wasted enough time. You are in the realm between the living and the dead. Ah, I see, that's not easy to hear, Naruto replied stoically. He really didn't know how to respond to knowing he was close to both life and death. So, what's keeping me alive? Naruto asked softly. The demonic entity within you is working hard to save you. I must give it credit. It does not want to die, the man responded with a small shake of his head and a chuckle. Well, at least it's good for something at least, but that also answers my question. I was going to ask if you were the Kyuubi. The man laughed at this and shook his head. I am a different being altogether. I was not aware that I would find myself in this position after a large percentage of my soul was recycled into yours. Explain, Naruto said with a stare. Yes, I shall. the man said as he stood up and looked at the sky. My name is Hisashi Hanzo, and during my time alive and undead, I went by another name. My name was Scorpion and I, Uzumaki Naruto, am the remains of your old soul. Naruto stood flabbergasted at the news he just received. I'm sorry. Did you say you were a part of my soul? Naruto exclaimed. The man nodded, clearly amused despite the situation they were in. Can I get some sort of explanation, please? Naruto requested with a stare. Because today has been a lot and this is just. Oh boy, I understand what you mean all too well, the man said as he stood up and looked at the sky. My name is Hisashi Hanzo, and during my time alive and undead, I went by another name. My name was Scorpion and I, Uzumaki Naruto, am the remains of your old soul. Naruto had heard a lot of things in his life. But this was a new one. This man before him stated that he was his old soul, but that shouldn't be possible. How can that be possible? Naruto asked with a distrustful gaze at the man before him. I was always told that every man has a soul unique to him. Hanzo nodded in agreement then said, and that is true Naruto, but what you don't know is that there is a balance. For every life that ends, another begins, and whenever a new life is born, a new soul is created along with it. While the life that ends has two destinations, the heavens are to the netherrealm or hell as you know it. Hanzo crossed his arms and began to explain. Normally, these two paths do not overlap, because as you said, a soul is unique to the new life, but there is a small window that appears between the death of a being and the birth of a new being, and if it happens between that nanosecond window, the soul of the recently deceased becomes reconstructed into a blank slate. At least, that was what should have happened. Naruto quirked an eyebrow, clearly wanting the man before him to continue. When I passed on, my soul was reconstructed into your own, but somehow, I remained dormant deep within the recesses of the soul, until now, Hanzo told the youth, a troubled look on his face. And, well, that is something, but you look troubled about it, Naruto noted. Shouldn't you be happy that you are back? I know I would be. I am troubled because this spells death for us both and not just physically, Hanzo replied sharply, his eyes narrowing down at the blonde in front of him. This meeting was never to happen. I'm sure I was to remain dormant until your passing where things would have progressed naturally, but because I returned, it's causing our soul to fracture. That's bad, but how bad? Naruto asked with a fearful tone in his voice. When a soul fractures for any reason, it only has 10 minutes to heal that fracture before it becomes unstable until it shatters like glass. When that happens, the very existence of that being is wiped from the memory of every living person that being has ever met, but what happens to the shattered soul remains a mystery, Hanzo replied with a stoic tone. Naruto's eyes widened in horror at the words that were just spoken from his past life. Not only was this causing his body to die quicker, but if that did happen, they would be erased completely. That can't be. You said that a soul goes to heaven or hell. Not erased. Naruto shouted, panic written across his face. Yes, I did. A soul. Meaning one. When I was awoken, our soul split in half to accommodate my consciousness, and a body cannot operate with a fractured soul, Hanzo replied instantly. But what about the Kyuubi? It's a living, breathing demon inside of me. It has a soul. Can't it heal us enough for this to not happen? Naruto exclaimed. The Kyuubi, although she has limitless amounts of chakra that can perform many miracles, her chakra cannot heal a fractured soul, nor can her soul fill in the fracture, Hanzo answered as his eyes gazed at the sky above. It seems the shattering is starting, Hanzo cryptically noted. Naruto followed Hanzo's gaze to the sky, and the first thing he noticed was that the orange sun that was previously in the sky had become pitch black, and within it was white spider web cracks within it. And those cracks were spreading. So there is nothing we can do then? Naruto asked, overwhelming sadness filling his heart as he watched the cracks slowly making their way from the sun and onto the sky around it. We're stuck watching ourselves being sent to oblivion. Hanzo remained silent for a few moments before he said, not quite, there is one thing we can do that can fix this. Naruto's hopeful eyes latched onto the man, his voice almost quivering as he asked, how? How can we stop this? Hanzo remained silent for what seemed like several lifetimes before he turned his head to look at the blonde. The only way we can fix this is to become one once more. That's it. That sounds very simple. Do I have to fight you or something? Naruto asked, his voice now stronger than it was before. Hanzo shook his head slowly, dashing Naruto's hopes. What I mean by, to become one once more, it doesn't mean us fighting for control. In fact, fighting would only hasten the fracture, hence why I did not fight you immediately upon awakening. If that wasn't the case, you would be dead right now, Hanzo said with a wry smirk on his face before he became serious once more. Now that my consciousness has returned, it brought forth everything I was. My abilities, my skills, my personality, and my memories, Hanzo explained before he looked away from the blonde. I introduced myself to you as the remains of your old soul, but that is no longer true. I am now half of this new soul and you have become the same. If we combine, we will no longer be Hisashi Hanzo and Uzumaki Naruto. We would become a new being altogether, Hanzo finished, his head lowered to the ground. Naruto merely shrugged and stated with an airy tone, that shouldn't be too bad then. I mean, you seem like a somewhat normal guy. How bad could your past really be? The moment those words left Naruto's mouth, Naruto felt something in the air change. It was as if the heat was turned up in the entire area. You don't know the words that you speak, Hanzo gravely whispered, his back turned to Naruto, who was confused by the older man's words. The heat around the area spiked up tremendously after Naruto spoke and for a moment, Naruto was confused. Where was this heat coming from? Just then, small amounts of fire particles began to rise into the air around Naruto and Hanzo, making the former look in alarm. Naruto didn't know what was going on, but from the way it looked, it was like they were rising from hell itself. Naruto turned to Hanzo, who was eerily quiet this entire time and was about to open his mouth when a large burst of flame erupted from out of Hanzo's body, causing Naruto to fly back onto the ground. What the hell is going on? Naruto shouted as the echoed roar of Hanzo was heard from the large tower of fire that had warped around the man. Without warning, the fire quickly dispersed from around the man, but when the figure turned around, Naruto received a shock. The figure was wearing two black and gold greaves which had a gold scorpion design along with baggy black pants that held a large silver belt with a skull in the middle of it. Coming from beneath the belt was a gold-colored sash with a gold-colored metal trim that hung down to the figure's thighs. The figure's chest had two thick wide gold armored straps that were across his bare chest and went down behind the belt, which was presumably attached to the sash, but on both straps of armor were two lines of three golden spikes with a single spike underneath the two lines. Also on the figure's chest were large chains that were attached to the shackles around the neck of the figure and the sides of the belt. The figure also had his right arm, from his knuckles to bicep, covered in thin chains, while the left arm bore a black metal gauntlet that bore a gold scorpion on it. But when Naruto finally gazed upon the head, his stomach dropped. Instead of the stern, masculine bearded Japanese face of Hanzo was the head of a complete skull, and to make matters worse, the skull was on fire. What the hell are you? Naruto screamed, terrified of the image before him. The figure began to walk towards him, the hellish fire around him licking and scorching the green grass beneath his feet as he screeched, I am revenge taken form. I am the result of destroying and rebuilding one's soul from the flames of the netherrealm itself. I am the ultimate force in death and destruction. I am Scorpion, the undead wraith of Hisashi Hanzo. Scorpion grabbed the terrified Naruto by his jacket and got his face close to Naruto's own and shouted, you think, in your tiny human mind, that what I've gone through was just rough. You do not know the words that you speak. I have battled mortals, demons, demigods, and even gods themselves. I have died, been undead, and returned to life. I have seen things that will make your soul weep for eons. I know the pain that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemies, and you dare try to lessen the impact of my misery. Naruto was so scared and speechless that he couldn't even process the words coming from the undead specter's mouth. All he could do was stare into the eyeless, flaming sockets of the skull before him. You are speechless before the image you see before you. Imagine being forced into this form. Imagine all that you know being stripped away from you through waves of agony, rage, and despair by means of bathing in the fires of hell. Imagine drowning underneath your own revenge as the screams of your wife and son as they are being murdered inside of your head repeatedly while you are unable to save them. I can't. Naruto screamed out, tears streaming from his face from both fears of the warrior before him as well as the pain coming from the echoing voice attached to said warrior. The skull laughed darkly and replied, "You will," and with those words, the world around Naruto was enveloped by the hellish storm of flames, but instead of being burned, Naruto found himself falling through the memories of Hanzo, Scorpion. Naruto could see it all. Naruto was forced to watch all of the happiness Hanzo had from the moment he was a small child to his time as a grown man and the leader of his clan, the Shirai Ryu, with his beautiful wife Kana and his infant son by his side. It was then Naruto watched as a bunch of warriors in blue stormed through the clan and kill everyone there. He watched Hanzo fight valiantly, but he was killed by the Lin Kuei assassin Sub-Zero, his head and spine ripped from his body. The last image Hanzo saw was the frozen corpses of his wife and child. Naruto then watched as Hanzo was tortured and tormented for ages until the necromancer Quan Kai twisted and shaped the broken soul of Hisashi Hanzo in the flames of the Netherrealm to give birth to Scorpion, all while promising the spirit by helping him gain his honor and avenge his fallen clan and family. With wide eyes, Naruto watched as the Thunder God Raiden urged Scorpion to defeat but not kill Sub-Zero, promising him that he would make a request to the Elder Gods to bring the Shirai Ryu and the Hell Spawn's family back to life, but only if Sub-Zero remained alive. Scorpion contemplated Raiden's offer of bringing his clan back to the world of the living and eventually looked towards Raiden and silently nodded his consent. Scorpion was finally confronted by his rival, Sub-Zero, who showed great disrespect to Scorpion and his clan's memory, which enraged Scorpion, who immediately took both of them to the Netherrealm, where they engaged in combat. In the end, Naruto saw that Scorpion emerged victorious and decided to spare Sub-Zero's life, only to have Quan Kai appear, ordering Scorpion to kill Sub-Zero. Remembering his bargain with Raiden, Scorpion refused, stating that Sub-Zero had been defeated. But the necromancer decided that it was now the time to replay what happened to Scorpion, and that proved to be effective because in gruesome detail, Naruto watched as Scorpion gained his vengeance on Sub-Zero, even as the cryomancer screamed his innocence. And because of this, the deal between him and the Thunder God was done. Scorpion was hardly satisfied and chose to continue fighting for Quan Kai. Naruto spiraled through the years of horror that Scorpion had caused in the name of the necromancer who had molded him, and all that Naruto felt while he watched Hanzo's life up until his final death was nothing short but violence, loneliness, self-loathing, and it was hitting a huge target in Naruto's heart. Despite the bright spots in Hanzo's life, such as Takahashi Kenshi talking him out of suicide and training his son, Takahashi Takeda, Hanzo always remained alone until his dying day, and that was a fate that Naruto wouldn't wish on anyone. Suddenly, the flames around him faded away, to reveal Hanzo in front of him instead of Scorpion, but the man seemed to have a look of concern on his face. "I apologize. I lost my cool," Hanzo said calmly, but the worry in his eyes was evident. "And no, don't be," Naruto softly said, trying to shake the ACH in his heart. "It's funny, I was forced to watch everything about your past, and yet, despite the gore, the horrible images of hell and other things, there was one thing consistent." Naruto then lowered his head and whispered, "You were always lonely, when you weren't being a D. With Quan Kai in the Netherrealm as Scorpion, or training Takeda, or having tea with Kenshi as Hanzo, you always sat there, all alone, mourning your wife and your son and loss of both iterations of the Shirai Ryu. You died that way." Naruto's voice seemed to waver in sadness as he added, "The minute you died, I was born and I was alone. Both my parents died during Kyuubi's attack before it was sealed inside of me. I don't have any family or clan. I really don't have friends that would stick with me through thick and thin. Up until recently, all I had were dreams of having a family with me. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I'm sorry that I insulted you by making light of what you've gone through, and that you aren't alone." But as soon as Naruto said those words, he truly began to think that maybe he didn't want to go through with this after all. Would it honestly be so bad for everyone to forget about him? No one really cared if he was around in his village, and no one really wanted to be his friend. He was truly alone in this world, and seeing Hanzo's memories only amplified that loneliness. If he were to die and his soul shattered, his village would forget all about him and just think that the Kyuubi had died instead of being sealed away inside of him. And not to mention, instead of his birthday being a day of mourning and a day of chasing him down and trying to hurt him, Konoha would throw parades to celebrate. And who knows what would happen to the Kyuubi if he died. He didn't know if the Kyuubi would die as well or just be sent back to hell, but it Well, she, from what Hanzo said about her, would still be gone from this realm. It just felt as if everything good would happen if Naruto had just died. Seemingly unaware of Naruto's bitter thoughts, Hanzo lowered Naruto to the ground and softly chuckled. Thank you, Uzumaki Naruto. I just wish that taking you down my memories didn't cause the degradation of our soul to speed up 7 minutes, Hanzo said as he motioned to the sky above them. The entire sky was now right, and small pieces of the sky were falling down to the ground sporadically. How? Naruto harshly yelled. That is my fault. Letting Scorpion take control burns my soul's energy. It always has. Because of our situation, it burned our time as well. We only have 3 minutes left, Hanzo replied through his aggravated sigh. Okay, so tell me something, you said that we will merge completely, right? Will it hurt? Naruto asked as he faced the clan head of the Shirai Ryu. I won't lie to you, it will hurt. Despite being human during the end of that war against Shinnok, the hellfire of the Netherrealm still coursed through my veins. When we combine, it will rebuild you from the ground up, but it will feel like your very soul is burning in a lake of lava, Hanzo answered. Well, that's great, Naruto sarcastically muttered. While he was pretty shaken by what he had seen, Naruto couldn't allow himself to die here. There was too much he had to do. So much he had to say. Not just to his team, but to Haku. The reason Naruto was going through all of this in the first place. Naruto knew that from their night together and from her struggle during their battle to obey her master by not wanting to hurt him. And he remembered how heartbroken she had looked when he took his sensei's attack. She looked as if her entire world ended when he faded away. He had a chance to go back and make her happy. And that was more than enough for him. With a steel resolve, Naruto gave a small smirk and told Hanzo, I don't think that will be any problem, Hanzo. I actually expected that could happen considering us merging everything. I do have to say, being reborn by the flames of hell, talk about something I never expected to say in my lifetime. Well, any other side effect that could occur? I don't know, Hanzo answered. You don't know? Naruto asked, stunned by this admission from Hanzo. Hanzo sighed at this and said, despite learning all of this from Ermac after Kenshi converted him to our side and then Raiden moments before it all ended, I never got into the specifics. I never thought this could happen at all, but I do know this. When we merge, every last detail about us will come together. Now I do not know if my personality will overpower yours or vice versa. All I know is that if we don't do this now, we will never get another shot. Hanzo then held out his right hand and said, it's time. I don't think shaking hands will solve anything, Naruto said with a blank expression. At that moment, Naruto felt the return of the intense heat returned along with the fire particles beginning to float up from around them, making Naruto a little wary, considering the last time this happened, he was looking at a flaming skull. I'm not holding out my hand for a handshake, Hanzo said with a serious look on his face. Naruto then saw a lick of fire shoot around Hanzo before an aura of fire formed around him. I'm preparing myself for the merging of our fractured soul. I don't know what will happen from here on out, but we will see this through, unless you'd rather back out now, Hanzo explained. Truth be told, I don't like the idea of coming out of this as someone new, but it beats being erased from all existence and other unknown factors. Whatever happens, I get to see Haku-chan again, I get to keep my promise to her and the people of Wave, and that is all that truly matters. Naruto shouted and clasped his hand with Hanzo's outreached hand. The moment their hands connected, the fire roared to life around the two of them before making a full circle around them, but before the fire fully engulfed the two of them, the last thought running through Naruto's pure mind was, don't worry Haku-chan, I'm coming back to you, I promise. Kakashi had seen many things in his day. He had seen his father's dead body. He had seen the horrors of war. He had seen his teammates' blood on his hands after he struck her down with his Reikiri. But the one thing he had never seen before was one shinobi sacrifice their life to save their enemy. And to make it stranger, the enemy was currently sobbing into his chest. Kakashi, sensei, sorry, Naruto panted out, his eyes pupils fading in and out as he tried to stay as long as possible. Unfortunately, the shinobi that had done it was his student, the small child he had watched over since the early days of his Anbu career. Uzumaki Naruto. Why did you do it, Naruto? Kakashi asked solemnly, unable to fully understand why his student had taken the blow for his enemy. Haku-chan, love her, Naruto stated with a weak smile on his face, his skin now becoming pale. Kakashi's eyes widened at this admission, able to connect the dots that were left by his dying student. He turned his head to the masked apprentice of Zabuza, who had removed their mask to reveal the kind girl Naruto had introduced them to one day. Kakashi thought she was a pretty nice gal when his student shyly introduced her to him as if he wanted his approval. Which Kakashi found as cute. But now he was furious at the fact that the person Naruto spoke about endlessly was the one who had led to his student's foolish decision. Needed to stay alive. She was torn between her love of me and her loyalty to Zabu, Naruto said, pain filling his voice, causing Kakashi to leave his mind and look at his dying, dorky student. Naruto-kun, why you selfless fool? Haku shouted angrily and helplessly as she looked at his bloody, pale face. My life is meaningless. I failed Zabuza-sama, I failed you, I am a failure in every meaning of the word. Why sacrifice your life for me? A worthless tool. Why Naruto-kun? You deserved your life more than I ever did. Kakashi was skilled at spotting liars. He was almost as skilled at that underrated art as his good friend, Mitarashi Anko, so seeing Haku's mannerisms and hearing her heartbreaking tone of voice told him that she was genuine in her feelings. But then again, she was working with Zabuza of all people, who possibly taught her how to lie so seamlessly, that she could even fool himself or Anko if they ever met. Kakashi watched as Naruto placed a hand on top of Haku's head, which caused her to stop speaking immediately and look up at him, her tears still flowing. What good wou would I be, if I let my precious, son die? Naruto breathed out with a smile before his head slumped back and his pupils faded away. Kakashi kneeled down and said a gentle prayer as he shut Naruto's eyelids for him, his own heart howling in sorrow. He had watched this child grow into the dorky genin he had been, and while he was unable to always be there, he always made sure that Naruto was protected as much as he could be without revealing the Hokage's favoritism to the youth. Kakashi could remember every birthday cake he had snuck into the youth's home and the random gifts he would leave when the boy was sad. He could remember sitting in his corner as Naruto decorated his home and on more than one occasion, held the child as he slept away the sadness he felt. No longer would Kakashi see those vibrant blue eyes staring up at him with some random ramen fact. No longer would he see his student become indignant about his height, no longer would he see his student's dream come true. He was gone. Kakashi's sorrow morphed into fury as his eyes fell upon the sobbing form of Haku and scathingly asked, "Is this what you desired?" Haku continued her sobs as if she hadn't heard his anger above her own sadness. And this only made the copycat shinobi angrier. But before anything could be done by him, the deep voice of Zabuza rang out. "Haku, I do not know what is going on, but we have a mission to finish." Once again, Haku continued on, making Kakashi pause. Naruto had said it himself, Haku was torn between obeying her master and her love for Naruto, which Kakashi didn't believe was true. But if she was actively ignoring the man she was willing to sacrifice herself for the now dead genin, there was something there. "Haku," Zabuza said, his voice coming out forcefully. "We have a mission to finish." "To hell with the mission," Haku shouted, shocking both Kakashi and Zabuza, but probably more Zabuza than himself. "Haku, do you know who you are speaking to like that?" Zabuza threatened with an angry scowl visible beneath his mask. Haku remained silent as Zabuza continued to speak, his voice thick with anger. "I am the one who took you in when you were just a small beggar on the streets. I trained you to be my tool and I command you to remove yourself from the dead shinobi." Kakashi watched as Haku kissed the lips of Naruto before she slipped on her mask, as if she was masking the fear of disobeying her master, and stood tall before she turned around and said, "Why, you're right, you found me after my father killed my mother and I killed him. You taught me all that you knew and put me through hell, you raised me to be an emotionless tool." Kakashi noticed that her voice remained gentle, almost sad as she revealed her past out in the open, but she continued before he could dwell on it further. "I followed you, at first out of obligation for you saving my life and giving me purpose, but soon, I started to look at you as a father, but all you saw me was as a tool. Kakashi saw an unfamiliar emotion behind Zabuza's eyes, but they quickly vanished, replaced by a cold, unflinching look. That is what all shinobi is, Haku. A means to an end for anyone that needs us. You are no different. Naruto thought I was different. Haku snapped, anger immediately filling her voice, which once again shocked Kakashi and Zabuza. All he wanted was for me to be at his side to fight for the light of this world. Not as a tool, not as someone beneath him, but as his partner. Kakashi watched Haku's right hand rise to her chest, her head looking away from Zabuza as she whispered, Naruto believed in me, despite all of the evil that I had done as your tool, he believed that I could help him. Even when I lost that faith in myself. And with him gone, I won't let his promise go in vain. Kakashi heard the pain in her voice as she spoke to the man she viewed as a father, and even more of it when she mentioned Naruto's passing and hearing that made the anger in Kakashi's heart die out. She was sincere about her feelings for him. There was no longer any doubt about it. What are you saying, Haku? Zabuza angrily whispered, Kakashi noticing that his enemy's eyes were glowing with the negative emotion inside them. I'm saying that as much as I care about you, I can't allow you to interfere in my new mission, Haku said, her voice becoming stronger in Kakashi's ears. I am no longer your tool. For Naruto, I will fill this world with light. Where no shinobi, no human should think of their fellow man as mere tools. Zabuza let out a scathing laugh at Haku's declaration and questioned, so you are truly willing to leave my side over a brat you met in such a short amount of time? How foolish. The kid is dead. Do you think it matters that you keep his dream? Zabuza leaned his battered body against the steel railing of the bridge and said, the kid sure did brainwash you, He filled your head with such flowery, naive words and you ate it up like a damn idiot. Haku, you live in a world that is grim and dark. This world will swallow you whole and lead you to your death, like it did him. He died because he didn't want me to die for you. Haku responded, her voice coming out sad and yet enraged at the same time. He sacrificed his life because he knew how much you meant to me, and yet you talk down about him like a mere roach. I won't allow you to disrespect him after his sacrifice. So what will you do, Haku? Will you fight me, the man who saved you from certain death, from a kid who was stupid enough to fall for his enemy? Zabuza asked with a grave tone in his voice. Haku silently shook her head and kneeled beside Naruto as she answered, I am no longer your tool. Out of respect for what you have done, I do not wish to fight you or kill you. I just want you to leave me here. I don't think I can let either of you go. Gato hired you both to kill Tazuna. There is no way I will allow you two to go without knowing if Tazuna is safe, Kakashi suddenly said to the two of them, a confused frown on his face. Haku and just abandoned Zabuza, and Zabuza hadn't blown up or gotten angry. Instead, Kakashi noticed that Zabuza was staring at the young female, but that look was in his eyes. Kakashi noticed it once more, but it was so strong, he could finally realize what it was. Pride. Zabuza looked at Haku with pride. But why? Very well, Haku, Zabuza said with a nod. You wish to leave, I will allow it. You are no use to me as a tool anyways. You failed to do what you were trained to do anyways, and that was to have a cold heart. Kakashi could tell from Haku's body language that she was upset by Zabuza dismissing her as his tool, but then it became strong. Haku kneeled next to Naruto's body and replied, Zabuza-san, the moment Naruto-kun stepped on this bridge, I knew I couldn't fight and kill him or his team. Kakashi opened his mouth to speak, but a weasel-sounding voice coming from the distance was heard saying, such a sad conversation, Zabuza-san. So I assume that you couldn't complete your mission, Demon of the Hidden Mist. Kakashi watched as the mist dissipated, revealing Gato and a large band of thugs behind him, telling Kakashi that a double cross was coming for his enemy, and from the look of realization and then rage, Zabuza understood as well. So, the businessman grows a spine, Zabuza stated, a mirthless chuckle leaving his lips. I should have known it would come at a bullshit moment, but it seems when it rains, it pours, Kakashi muttered with a frown on his face, interrupting Zabuza. So you are the man we are here to stop. Expected you to be taller. Gato gritted his teeth, but then he smirked and replied, and I expected you and your rotten shinobi to be dead. But we can't all get what we want. Well, at least at the moment. Kakashi and Zabuza traded glances before the two narrowed their eyes at the smaller man as the latter said, "You failed in getting rid of all but one of these maggots, so I have decided to terminate our deal, and allow a suitable replacement for you." He sounds so smug, Kakashi grumbled to himself as he narrowed his eyes, realizing he was becoming weaker due to the overuse of his Sharingan. "So it seems you betray me. Good. I finally get to do what I planned to do from the start and kill you," Zabuza stated with amusement dripping from his voice before he asked, "Who is the fool that protects you from my blade?" "I am," a deep, almost echoing voice answered Zabuza's question. The crowd of thugs seemed to part as a 7 feet tall male with blood-red armor which had a black GI above it, with the sleeves torn from it with black gloves, walked through the middle of the parted group. Kakashi noticed that the man has light brown eyes and his blood-red armor extended all the way to the bottom half of his face, covering it up. He also noticed that underneath the red armor, the man wore a white cloth that also covered both sides of his face and the top of his head. The mysterious man also wore a red conical straw hat which was known as a casa, which looked to be the same material as the red armor over the white cloth, and he also seemed to be wearing what seemed to be a bronze-colored ring around his neck which he wears over his red armor. Also, the armor covering his arms and torso is plated. But the main thing Kakashi noticed was that the man was wearing an Iwagakure forehead protector on a black cloth. Let me introduce Joki no Oni, Demon of the Steam, Han. A very powerful shinobi from Iwagakure no Sato, and he has taken on the mission of protecting me and killing all of you, Gato stated with a loud laugh. I always have a backup, Zabuza-san. And this one will be the end of you, Gato stated before he chuckled cruelly. And I will enjoy watching you all die. Kakashi let out a harsh scoff and stood tall and replied, "You think adding him will stop my team and I from completing our mission? Trust me, it'll only make me angrier, and that makes me more determined." Kakashi, Zabuza stated with a smirk. Looks like since my contract has been ended, I no longer need to fight you. Well, that is all well and good, but now we have a new problem. Do you mind the team up of the desperation variety? Kakashi asked with a nonchalant tone, despite the severity of the situation. I would like nothing more. My arms are weakened but thankfully not broken. I should still be able to wield Kubikiri Hako just at half power, Zabuza growled out as he picked up his blade from the ground and held it at his side. Kakashi could see Zabuza's arms shake under the weight of the blade as well as the blood dripping from multiple wounds on the man's arms, but he would not denounce his strength now. I will assist in this as well. Kakashi and Zabuza looked back and saw Haku walking in the middle of the two, her voice as cold as the elemental Kekkei Genkei she wielded. Haku, Zabuza breathed out, his eyes narrowed at the female Nuke Nin. I may not be your tool, but Naruto-kun died wanting to liberate this village and Gato is the one in the way. I will start his dream by ending the very mission that gave him this dream, Haku stated as she pulled out her Senbon. Kakashi nodded and said, trust me, the more, the merrier. We are going to need all the help we can get outside of my squad protecting Tazuna. Kakashi had noticed, with pride of course, Sasuke and Sakura in the distance standing with the scared Tazuna behind them. He didn't even have to tell them to do it. So, 3 against 1, Kakashi heard the armored Iwa shinobi state before he chuckled lowly. You all should have bought more men. Zabuza scoffed and yelled, save your bravado for the demons in hell. Let's begin. Kakashi shouted before he, Haku, and Zabuza launched themselves toward the imposing armored shinobi from Iwa. But if any of them had noticed, the border around Naruto's wound began to glow a dull fiery reddish orange. Let's begin. Kakashi shouted before he, Haku, and Zabuza launched themselves toward the imposing armored shinobi from Iwa. Kakashi was the first to meet Han straight on, his right fist colliding against the right forearm of the armored shinobi, but Kakashi quickly found himself being socked in the jaw, causing Kakashi to soar past Zabuza, who began to swing his blade from his side towards the Iwa nin. Han sidestepped the first wide swing of the Kubikiri Hako, then ducked the second swing before kicking Zabuza in the stomach, sending Zabuza skidding backward. Before Han could follow up, Haku vaulted over Zabuza's body with 5 Senbon clutched in her hand. With a flick of her wrist, the 5 Senbon flew towards Han, but the Iwa shinobi disappeared in an explosion of steam. Haku landed on the ground and was quick to maneuver from side to side to avoid the quick jabs of the Iowa shinobi, but she failed to block the rather quick kick that struck her stomach, sending her flying towards a running Kakashi. Kakashi leapt over Haku as he completed a set of hand seals and shouted, "Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu." Han eyed the giant fireball that was shot from Kakashi's mouth and couldn't help but chuckle as he slipped his right hand into his GI. With a burst of steam from the furnace attached to his armor, Han muttered, "Futen, Joki Domu, boil style, steam dome." The steam around Han quickly whipped up around him into a hazy orb around him as Kakashi's jutsu slammed into the orb, clashing wildly. The fire began to wrap itself around the dome before both the fire and the steam faded away, leaving Han standing in the middle of a medium-sized crater, on the patch of cement that was within his technique. "Is that all?" the shinobi questioned, much to the ire of all three of his opponents. "Far from it," Zabuza growled. Haku. Despite wanting to separate from the man who had saved her, Haku knew that this was a serious situation and she would need to put that aside to assist them in this battle. Without missing a beat, the two nuke nin began to form several seals before the two ended in unison. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu, water style. Water dragon jutsu, Hyoten, Hyoryu no Jutsu. Ice style. Ice dragon jutsu. Zabuza and Haku shouted before their respective dragons came into existence. Seeing this made Kakashi smirk as an idea formed in his head. "Let's put my affinity to use." Kakashi shouted as he formed his own hand seals before he exclaimed, "Raiden, Ikazukiryu no Jutsu. Lightning style. Lightning dragon jutsu." The three elemental dragons soared towards Han and began to meld together, and Han was momentarily surprised by this ingenious move. But a massive amount of steam came from his furnace and with a smirk, he shouted, "Futen, Namatsu Joki Domu, boil style, dense steam dome." The multi-elemental dragons clashed against the enhanced steam dome, and for a moment, the dome seemed to start to weaken against the triple threat, but without warning, both the ice dragon and water dragon swirled around the dome before evaporating completely, leaving the lightning dragon, which quickly died away as well. Zabuza, Kakashi, and Haku's eyes widened in shock at how their attacks broke down against the dome, but they quickly became uneasy at how the dome remained swirling around the Iwa Nin, compared to the last time. That uneasiness soon turned into horror as the steam from the dome began to thicken and swirl wildly until a large white dragon was seen swirling around Han's relaxed form. Futen, Keianryu no Jutsu, boiling style, heat dragon jutsu. With a point, the dragon roared and launched toward the three shinobi. Haku immediately formed another set of seals and shouted, "Hyoten, Makio Hyosho. Ice style. Demonic ice crystal mirror." A large dome of ice mirrors appeared to surround the three, but then Haku shouted, "Hyoten, Makio Hyosho Kyutai, ice style, demonic ice crystal mirror sphere." The mirrors quickly surrounded and then enclosed the three, leaving no crack between them as Han's technique slammed into them hard, causing the entire sphere to shake, but their opponent's attack quickly dispersed. "Okay, this is not going so well," Kakashi panted out in exhaustion, falling down to one knee. Zabuza agreed and leaned against his blade, panting as well. "Yeah," Zabuza agreed, shaking the feeling back into his arms. "I can see why Kiri wants his head on a pike. He's damn near invincible with his Futen, even Mei would have a hard time with him." Kakashi grunted in response. It didn't take a genius to realize that the only reason the two of them were so beat was due to being low on chakra from not only their own battle with each other but also launching some of their strongest techniques. Only Haku seemed well off in terms of chakra, but who knew when that would last. Their opponent's steam was giving him unnatural abilities, and because of this, not only was Han able to defeat his jutsu on its own, but he was able to defeat the unified force of Haku, Zabuza, and himself as well. And despite being close to blacking out from chakra exhaustion, their attack should have been able to take him out. If that steam was able to do all of that, would his Reikiri even work? Only one way to find out, Kakashi mentally growled out, momentarily shutting his left eye to reserve some sort of energy as he popped a soldier pill into his mouth, which gave him enough of a boost to summon one final Reikiri. He didn't want to use this technique, but he had no choice at this rate. The Iowa shinobi was a tough competitor and they needed to take him down. "Alright, I have a plan," Kakashi said with a harsh cough. I only have one more Reikiri in me before I'm completely tapped out and no use to you guys, but I need a few seconds to prepare. I'm surprised you're willing to use that again after killing your student with it, Zabuza coldly commented, making Kakashi flinch at his words. I don't want to do it but it needs to be done, Kakashi stated with narrowed eyes towards Zabuza. Zabuza scoffed and said, I'll give you the time. Haku, keep the sphere around Kakashi until the very last second. Understood Zabuza, Haku responded, her voice controlled despite her heart hurting from the still open wound of Naruto's death. But as Zabuza turned around, the mirror before him cracked before exploding completely, revealing the fists of their opponent. Zabuza swiftly lifted up Kubikiri Hako and managed to get the blade to protect his chest as well as Kakashi's mere seconds before the fists slammed into them, sending them both through the ice mirror behind them. Han came skidding into the middle of the mirrors, his body exuding the steam that had been built up within his armor, but Haku quickly flew into the mirror and replaced the broken ice mirrors instantly. Han looked around and chuckled as he faced multiple images of Haku within the ice mirrors around him and asked, Do you truly think that you can stop me with a dome of ice? Haku held up a small kunai with her right hand and muttered, We're about to find out. Village of Wave. Pav. Hataki Kakashi. Sensei. Are you okay? Kakashi groaned as he leaned up from the ground with Sakura kneeling on the left side while Sasuke held a kunai against the downed Zabuza's throat a few feet away. Despite being shielded by Zabuza's sword, the two of them were sent far down the bridge by the punch of Han, and Kakashi hadn't realized how powerful that punch was until he saw Sakura's green eyes staring down at him in concern. Kakashi gave his female student an eye smile and said, I am fine Sakura-san, but thank you for asking. Kakashi then turned his head to Sasuke and said, You can move, Zabuza is no longer an enemy. He could see a shocked look appear on Sasuke's face, and for a moment, Kakashi was unsure if Sasuke would obey, but the genin did, and not a second later, Zabuza nailed the boy in the stomach. Zabuza! Kakashi yelled in outrage at Zabuza for hitting his student. We are on the same side. You have no right hitting my student. Your student had a kunai to my throat. He is very lucky I didn't kill him, Zabuza responded coldly as he leaned up off the ground before he said, TCH, that damn Iwa shinobi knocked us all the way here near the start of the bridge. Yeah, despite the mirrors Haku made to slow down our flight, Kakashi muttered as he got up on his feet. We need to hurry. Who knows how long Haku can stand up to him? Haku, Sasuke muttered, causing Kakashi's eyes to glance at the genin. Haku, the girl Naruto bought to dinner that night. She's the one I was fighting earlier before Naruto told me to leave. What does she have to do with this? Why are you not fighting Zabuza? And where the hell is the dope anyways? He should be helping us guard Tazuna. Kakashi turned to Zabuza and said, You go ahead. I'll catch up soon. Zabuza scoffed at this and quickly dashed away, leaving Kakashi alone with his remaining students and Tazuna, who had fainted due to exhaustion and fear. Kakashi was going to ask how they didn't know about Naruto, but Kakashi quickly realized that the fog was truly thick and they were far away enough to not see what had happened to the blonde, but not far enough for him to not sense their chakra signatures. He decided that he would let them in on to why he was helping Zabuza and Haku, but he wanted to avoid telling them about Naruto until the mission was complete. Gato betrayed Zabuza during our battle and bought a strong shinobi to kill us all. Because of this, Haku, Zabuza, and I teamed up to stop him. Sasuke and Sakura looked at each other in alarm at what they had missed by being back here, but then Sasuke shook his head, stepped forward, and said, Alright then, if this shinobi is stronger than you guys, then I'll come with to help. There's no need Sasuke, Kakashi replied. The three of us are strong enough to handle it. You two continue to protect Tazuna. Kakashi then looked at the unconscious form of the man and sheepishly added, Well, his sleeping form. Then how did you two get down here in the first place? Sasuke asked with a sour frown, making Kakashi frown as well. You and Zabuza don't look the coward type, and plus Haku is not with you, making me think you two were knocked all the way back here. Come on Kakashi-sensei, I can help. No, Kakashi sternly said, a little peeved at Sasuke's refusal to accept his orders. You will remain here with Sakura to protect Tazuna at all costs. You tell me to stay back, and yet Naruto is missing as well. Is he up there helping Haku? Sasuke asked with a scowl on his face, making Kakashi hide a wince from him at the mention of Naruto. Sasuke-kun, Sakura softly spoke, causing both Kakashi and Sasuke to look at her. Kakashi-sensei said it was he, Zabuza, and Haku were fighting this shinobi. He didn't say anything about Naruto. Sasuke seemed to realize this and slowly turned to Kakashi and asked, "So where is Naruto then? If he isn't up there with you. He didn't run away, did he?" Kakashi realized that there was no point in hiding it anymore, considering that they would be told anyways. Taking a deep breath, Kakashi said, "During my battle with Zabuza, before the new shinobi arrived, Naruto took an attack meant for Zabuza to save Haku's life. He didn't make it. Naruto's gone. Gone." Sasuke stuttered with a stunned expression. No. That can't be right. Naruto can't be gone." Kakashi saw Sakura fall to her knees as her bottom lip trembled and her green eyes became wet with unshed tears before he turned back to Sasuke's stunned face and said, "I'm sorry, Naruto's dead." "That can't be right." Sakura shouted, tears spilling down her face. "Naruto is too stupid to die. He can't be dead." "He is," Kakashi responded to her with sympathy. It was never easy breaking news like this to the teammates of the departed, but had to break the news to them now before they wound up victims as well. Kakashi looked away from Sakura when she began to uncontrollably sob and then turned to Sasuke. "Stay here, I do not wish to bury another one of my students on this day." Kakashi turned around and dashed away from the two, guilt tearing into his heart at the entire situation. He knew that he shouldn't have left the way he did, but he had a mission to finish. He would deal with the fallout later. Village of Wave. Pav. Hyoden no Haku. With unmatched speed, Haku dashed from mirror to mirror with two kunai in her hands, using each dash to slash at her enemy within her grasp. But each time her kunai met his armor, he would grunt but look no worse for wear, and it was concerning her greatly. She had already used quite a lot of chakra during these last few minutes and her speed was taking a dip in response. Nearly twice, he had almost caught her mid-dash, but because of her additional jutsu, she was exerting far more energy. But she couldn't give up now. She had to take him down in order to take out Gato, keeping the promise Naruto had made before he died. After another quick slash and dash into the mirror, Haku tried to hide her panting as Han stood in the middle of the sphere, steam slowly rising to the ceiling of the ice sphere. Haku glanced up at the ceiling and reinforced her jutsu's strength and immediately dashed out of the mirror to the back of Han, but while she was able to strike his back, when she was heading towards the mirror to her upper right, Han was inches away from grabbing her foot. Haku flashed to the mirror to the upper left of Han and dashed from it and landed a slash to his mask before dashing into the mirror to his lower right. Haku wasted no time in flashing into the mirror above him, then melding from the other side of the sphere and quickly completed several seals before she slammed her palms on the mirror beneath her and shouted, "Hyoten! Susho no Arashi Ice Style, Crystal Storm." Quote, all of the ice mirrors began to crack ominously from within the sphere her opponent was trapped in, and the moment she leapt away, the entire sphere exploded into millions of shards that seemed to hover around Han, who Haku noticed was looking around the shards of ice. Haku landed on the ground and did one seal with her right hand before she shouted, "Jutsu Punish," while closing her hand into a fist. The ice shards immediately soared towards the Iowa shinobi, but before any of them could strike him, a shout of, "Futen! Kairaki Muso, Boil Style, Unrivaled Strength," reached her ears. Seconds later, a large burst of steam exploded from Han's body, causing the ice shards to evaporate mere seconds before they were to skewer him alive. "Never use ice against someone known as Joki no Oni," Haku heard the man exclaim with a laugh, possibly at the attempt her trying to fend him off. "HMPH, my ice will strike you down, no matter how strong that steam is," Haku stated coolly, not betraying the panic she was feeling at this moment, but then she happened to turn her head to see Naruto's body. "Naruto-kun, did he panic before he was killed?" Haku asked herself as she eyed his body, her eyes slightly softening. He must have. He knew he was going to die from Kakashi-san's attack, but he did it regardless and faced his death with dignity. If he can face death without fear, then I can face this shinobi with no difficulty, Haku thought, her confidence building as she faced Han once more. "You stand in my way in killing Gato, I will defeat you at any cost," Haku coldly stated while her eyes narrowed behind her mask. Such a big talk for a small child, Han stated before Haku saw him dash towards her, his right hand coast back to strike her. Surprised by how fast the armored man could move, Haku found herself dashing to the side to avoid his punch, then ducking his wide kick that was aimed at her head, but she was unable to avoid the elbow that slammed into her stomach. Haku skidded backward against the wall of the bridge, but this quickly proved to be a good thing because she was able to avoid the punch that was aimed at her head. But the cement wall behind her was not so lucky because the second his fist touched it, it exploded upon impact. Haku quickly jumped up and kicked his face with both feet, sending him taking 3 steps backward. Haku quickly flipped to her feet and then dashed back to avoid his shoulder tackle and shouted, "Hyoten, Hyoryu no Jutsu." Her ice dragon launched itself toward Han, who quickly blew out a large amount of steam and said, "Futen, Shinjoki no Yoroi boiling style." True steam armor, the steam wrapped around Han's body and hovered around every inch of his body. Just as the ice dragon was about to strike him down, Han roared, "Futen, Shinjoki Bakua, boiling style." True steam explosion. And with that, the steam shroud that covered Han's body suddenly expanded and exploded, instantly melting in the air, but the Hyoten user saw the water and quickly formed several seals with one hand and shouted, "Hyoten, Sensatsu Susho, ice style, 1,000 needles of death." The water from the melted ice dragon quickly became shards of ice that instantly started to rain down on the Iowa shinobi, but Han himself was able to switch himself with a brick, allowing it to be skewered by Haku's attack. Haku felt a large amount of chakra coming from her left and instantly twisted her body to avoid another cement-breaking strike from the large shinobi. Haku quickly ducked to avoid a kick aimed at her, but quickly swept Han's feet from underneath him, sending his torso slamming against the hole he had just created with his fist. Haku grabbed both of his legs, used her chakra to lift up the rather sturdy male and tossed him over the bridge before falling to one knee, her breathing coming out ragged. Haku stood up on shaky legs and took several steps back, but just as she did, a huge explosion of steam occurred before her which knocked her off her feet and sent her flying backwards into the air, where she then crashed onto the bridge hard. When Haku pushed herself from the ground, she saw that the portion of the bridge that was there before was now gone due to the explosion. But what she also saw was the body of Naruto hanging over the edge of the bridge that was no longer there. And he was beginning to slink off the edge until he fell off. "Naruto-kun!" Haku shouted in horror as she quickly moved to her feet to grab the legs of the blonde before it went over the edge. But when Haku leapt for Naruto's body, the cement below her began to crack before Han came bursting from underneath it fist first, causing his fist to meet her stomach hard. Haku flew backwards, then slammed back first against the wall of the bridge before she fell face first to the bridge, coughing and gasping for air from the intense pain she was feeling. And it wasn't all from the punch. Not only was Naruto dead, his body was now plummeting into the water below. Never getting the respectful burial she knew he was going to get once Gato was dead. Haku pushed herself up to her knees and then onto her feet, but she stumbled back onto her knees as she coughed hard, causing blood to land against her mask. Just a few seconds later, she felt a large amount of chakra building up before her, and that was when she looked up to see Han appeared before her, his hand coast back, ready to take off her head. But without warning, a large water dragon slammed into Han's side, taking the man off of his feet and thus, saving Haku from her fate. "Are you okay, Haku?" Haku looked up to see Zabuza standing before her, his blade sitting proudly on his shoulder. "I am fine," Haku replied coldly, trying to hide the physical and emotional pain she was currently in. She watched as Zabuza's eyes flashed down to her torso, which had her bare red-colored stomach showing due to the steam from Han burning off that part of her haori before he narrowed his eyes. Zabuza turned his head away from her to stare at the downed Han and muttered, "Stay, I will take over from here," before he dashed off to battle the steam-using shinobi. Village of Wave. Pav. Momochi Zabuza. Zabuza could see Han rising to his feet and didn't hesitate to start charging toward the shinobi with his blade scraping the ground beside him. The moment Zabuza got close, he swung his blade at an upward angle, hoping to cut the shinobi in half. Han was quick enough to lean back to avoid the swing, but Zabuza grabbed the hilt with his left hand and quickly swung his sword in a downward angle. Han was quick to avoid it as well. Zabuza twisted his body, switching the hands that were holding his blade, and swung it hard to try to bisect Han, but the Iowa shinobi stepped back to avoid it but didn't get too far due to Zabuza instantly following up the wide swing with a kick to the gut. Zabuza followed Han, who had stepped back from the kick and delivered 3 quick lunges with the tip of his blade. Han maneuvered away from the lunges but was once again caught by surprise by the sudden twist and kick by Zabuza, which nailed him in the chest. Zabuza got into a kneeling position with the blade before him and dashed forward sharply, causing the cement to rise in front of the blade before swinging the blade upward, but Han managed to switch out with a block of cement just seconds before he was cut in half. Just as the cement block just was. Zabuza growled at this and quickly turned around and blocked an oncoming strike from Han's right hand with his blade, causing his feet to skid against the ground below. Zabuza felt a bead of sweat slide down the right side of his face as he forced more chakra into his arms to keep them sturdy against the fist of the Iowa shinobi. He refused to let his opponent see his weakness. Zabuza's eyes flashed to Han's legs briefly before flashing back up to Han's orange eyes and sneered before he lifted his leg and kicked Han's right foot from beneath the man, making him lose just enough focus for Zabuza to leap up, while his sword stayed in place, and drop-kicked it, bouncing the flat side of his blade against Han's body. Due to the attack, Zabuza and Han fell on their backs. However, Zabuza flipped up to his feet and immediately swung his blade down at his downed opponent. Unfortunately, Han swiftly replaced himself with another cement block, causing Zabuza to slice right through it, but mere seconds after this, several kunai came soaring towards him. Zabuza deflected 6 of the 7 kunai, but he was unable to deflect the final kunai, which wound up piercing his left shoulder. Zabuza pulled out the kunai and stood up on his own 2 feet as he gritted his teeth. "You are really starting to piss me off," Zabuza growled as he faced the steam user. Han chuckled and responded, "And here I thought that was already the case." Zabuza didn't share Han's amusement nor his attempt at a joke and quickly showed him this when he dashed towards him with his blade in the air, ready to strike him down, but when his sword came down, Han was able to step backward to avoid the strike before he leapt up to kick Zabuza in the face. Zabuza's back slammed against the wall of the bridge, which caused him to drop his weapon, and took a single step forward and saw Han's fist coming towards him. Zabuza managed to grab the right fist of the Iowa shinobi and quickly responded by pulling Han forward and ramming his elbow into Han's face. Han stumbled back, lifted his leg, and kicked Zabuza hard in the chest, breaking several of Zabuza's ribs, which caused Zabuza to cough up blood behind the wraps on his face. Zabuza managed to pull the shinobi back towards him and landed a hard right hook to Han's jaw while letting go of his hand. Han stumbled to the side, but when he regained his bearings, Han was then kicked in the face by Haku, sending him sailing to the side. Zabuza turned to Haku, who had landed on her side, and said, "I thought I told you to remain where you were." "You did," Haku responded while clutching her stomach in pain, the pale skin now starting to blemish. "I decided not to listen." Zabuza scowled on the inside, but inwardly, he was impressed and proud of her. All Zabuza wanted from the moment he realized he cared for Haku far more than a tool was for her to become her own woman. Before this mission, she would do anything and everything he asked her to do. If he was as sick as some people, he knew he could have asked her to share his bed, she would have out of respect for all that he had done for her. He wanted to see Haku become self-reliant and stick to what she believed in instead of obeying his philosophy, and while he was annoyed that it took her falling in love with the enemy, but he was very proud that she decided it was now time to do what she wanted to do in life. It might have taken that blonde boy dying, but he was finally getting what he had wished for on her 10th birthday. "Very well, Haku, we need to get on our guards," Zabuza stated before he tried to stand up, only for him to fall back down, groaning in agony from his broken ribs. "Zabuza, you're too wounded to fight," Haku said with a worried frown on her face. "Please stay here. I can handle fighting him alone." Zabuza gritted his teeth and shook his head and once again tried to move, but the pain in his torso was white hot and Zabuza couldn't stop himself from growling in pain. Haku touched his chest and said, "Stay here. I will take it from here," before she dashed forward to attack Han once more. Zabuza watched as Haku maneuvered around Han's attacks, but she was clipped in her side hard by a sidekick, which caused her to stumble before he landed a solid hit to her face, which shattered her mask. Zabuza watched as Han steadily assaulted Haku's body with his fist, and despite Haku trying to get away, Han stopped each attempt with a brutal punch or kick. Finally, Han seemed to have enough of her, and after ducking a kick, Zabuza watched in horror as Han's body exploded in steam and Haku was sent sailing backward. Haku! Zabuza shouted, panic lacing his voice as he turned his head enough to see her slam into the cement hard before rolling to a stop in the distance. Zabuza heard someone running and quickly turned his head only to be picked up by his shirt by Han and launched into the air before his body slammed down hard on the bridge below beside Haku, who was struggling to her knees before falling down on the ground. Village of Wave. Pav. Hatake Kakashi. Kakashi was dashing over the many marks and cracks of the battles that were had, trying to get his way back to Zabuza and Haku when the latter of the two was seen rolling into his line of sight, with the former slamming to the ground moments later. Kakashi skidded to a stop and looked down at the two for mere seconds until he looked up to see Han charging towards them. Kakashi swore and quickly did several seals before he shouted, Raiden, Ikazukiryu no Jutsu. And with a thrust of his hands, his lightning dragon came forth and charged towards Han's form. But to Kakashi's horror, Han shouted, Futen, Joki Juden, boiling style, steam bullet. Steam wrapped around Han's outstretched fist, which then spread across his entire body. Suddenly, Han's speed increased dramatically as he charged forward, making him seem like a white bullet heading toward the lightning dragon. The minute the white bullet collided with the dragon was split apart forcefully as the white bullet cut through the middle of it, and that white bullet was coming right to Kakashi. Kakashi disengaged the jutsu and only had a few seconds to kick Haku and Zabuza away before switching himself out with a cinder block. The cinder block exploded in particles the moment the white streak slammed into it. Kakashi appeared behind the white blur now and quickly did the familiar hand seals for the Reikiri just as the blur took a sharp turn and began to come right towards him. Kakashi gritted his teeth and shouted, Reikiri! Before he dashed forward with the large ball of lightning in his hand with a shout, Kakashi put the jutsu out above him and met the white blur in a fierce clash of lightning vs steam. Kakashi gritted his teeth and tried to force more chakra into his attack, but he still found himself skidding against the ground against the long streak of steam before him. Kakashi tried to keep himself rooted to his spot by using his chakra to keep him still, but even that didn't work because the cement around his feet began to slide back, causing cracks to appear. Just then, a voice from within the white bullet shouted, Futen, Shinjoki Bakua. The white steam ball expanded against his Reikiri. Before Kakashi could disengage, an explosion of extreme heat enveloped Kakashi and his attack before the force of Han's attack sent Kakashi soaring high into the air, where he then slammed into the bridge so hard, he actually bounced off the ground momentarily before slamming into the ground at an angle, where his body rolled twice until he stopped completely. Village of Wave. Pav. Gato. Gato watched through his binoculars in glee as Han stood victorious against the pesky demon and his ice whore along with the famed copycat shinobi. I knew this investment would work out for me. Gato exclaimed in excitement as he hopped out from the wooden chair his henchman had brought along for him to sit down in. He knew it was dangerous to stay on the bridge while these shinobi battled, but he had to watch this battle. He wanted to see that smug bastard Zabuza stomped into oblivion by his superior while the ice whore was taken as his personal concubine. Gato looked back at his henchman and said, Let us go. It's time for me to see the life drain from the eyes of these shinobi. Village of Wave. Pav. Hyoten no Haku vs Joki no Oni. Han couldn't help but allow a smirk to appear. He had done what many couldn't claim to do. He had taken out not only one of the famed swordsmen of Kurigakure no Sato and his apprentice, but he also just took out the famed copycat shinobi, Hatake Kakashi. And he didn't even have to use Kokuo's chakra. Though if he had known how quick this battle would have been, he would have used the demonic chakra as quickly as possible. So, is that all there is from Momochi Zabuza and Hatake Kakashi? Han asked with a mocking tone as he slipped his right hand into his torn gi, which he was inwardly surprised at still being on his body after dealing with the girl and her speed in the ice sphere. He saw both men struggle to rise to at least lean up to face him, but their bodies had given up on them. They were too battered and weakened to battle him now. Han shook his head as he stared down at Zabuza's form and spat, How pathetic. I accepted doing this at half the price Gato was paying you Zabuza because I would get the chance to defeat a powerful shinobi that was rumored to match my strength. Han's head then turned to the unconscious form of Kakashi and shook his head slowly and added, and then to see the famed Hatake Kakashi here was an added bonus to test myself, and I managed to steamroll not only the two of you but another as well. How pathetic. I suppose it's time for me to complete the rest of my side mission before heading home. As Han began to walk away, he heard a female voice say from behind him, we aren't done yet. Han turned around to see the Hyoten user standing on shaky feet, blood coating the left side of her face while blood fell from the corner of the right side of her mouth. "IW won't let you hurt Tazuna-san," Haku muttered, but Han could see that not only was her body shaking from the pain she was in but her eyes were unfocused as well. He could tell that she was standing on her last legs, and as admirable as standing up to him was, he merely turned around and said, "Just stay down. I am no longer interested in fighting you. I just want to complete my mission." But he was quickly stopped when he heard the whistle of a kunai slicing through the air coming closer to him, where he then felt the kunai slice against his right shoulder, which caused him to stop. Han turned around and said, "You still wish to fight, despite me trying to spare you? Very well, I will end your life since you seem to want that." Futen. Joki Juden. Steam exploded from Han's armor as he charged towards Haku at breakneck speeds, but Haku quickly dodged to the side to avoid the oncoming steam-covered shinobi and quickly grabbed the unconscious Kakashi and hoisted him over her shoulder. Futen. Joki Juden. Haku once again avoided the shinobi by rolling to the left side of the bridge towards Zabuza. She swiftly hoisted her former master's body over her bare shoulder and then vaulted over the bridge before Han's fist slammed through the cement. Haku gritted her teeth as she hung upside down underneath the bridge and quickly ran to the other end of the bridge where the village would be, needing to get away as quickly as possible. Han looked over the edge of the bridge and let out a low chuckle as he felt her chakra signature running towards the end of the bridge where the other two chakra signatures were, and murmured, "Run as fast as you can, Hyoten user, you won't get far." Han smirked and immediately began to charge forward to where he expected Haku would be. Village of Wave. Pav. General, what the hell do you think you're doing here? Haku ignored the angered Sakura as she sat the unconscious forms of Zabuza and Kakashi down with a worried frown on her face. She knew that her opponent would come down here, and as much as she needed to run far, far away, she didn't have enough chakra to get her far enough before it was game over. So she had to go to the two most able bodies to get their assistance in hiding from the steam user, but unfortunately, Sasuke and Sakura were very upset with her due to the death of their teammate. Which was a legit reason to be upset with her, being that she felt it was her fault in getting him killed, but now was not the time to drown in that guilt. She had to get Zabuza and Kakashi out of there before it was too late. Haku stood up to turn around to face Sasuke but was stopped when Sakura suddenly appeared before her, anger in her jade-colored eyes. "How dare you show your face here?" Sakura asked her, making Haku narrow her own eyes. "We have no time for this," Haku told her, but as she tried to move to the side, Sakura instantly stepped in her way again. "We will make time," Sasuke told her as he quickly joined Sakura's side, his black eyes radiating hatred for her. "You are the reason that Naruto is dead. The least you can do is tell us why. And I will once this is all over, but we need to get out of here before he gets here," Haku promised, her voice taking on a pleading tone as her worry continued to increase. The longer she remained here, the shorter their chances were to get away. "No," Sakura shouted. "Naruto may have been an idiot, but he was our idiot. Our friend, and he's gone now. We need to know why. And since Kakashi-sensei and your partner is unconscious at this moment, you're the only one alive that can tell us why he had to die," Sasuke added with a cold look on his face. Haku was agitated by Sakura's saddened face as well as Sasuke's cold expression, and as much as she wanted to hold back her annoyance, she found herself unable to as she asked with a scathing tone, "And why do either of you care so much?" Her tone seemingly took Sasuke and Sakura by surprise, but Haku quickly jumped on this and said, "If you two were such good friends to him, then why did he feel so out of place within his village? Why did he ever feel alone with two such good friends like you two?" Naruto was lonely, Sakura whispered, her eyes looking down at the ground for a moment, her tone showing both surprise and sadness for the whisker-marked shinobi. He never showed it to us. He was always smiling and joking and being a general dork, Sasuke said, his voice equally quiet as well. Well, guess what? He was lonely in Konoha. As his friends, he should have been able to go to you two and tell you how he really felt instead of giving me the chance to know it. As Haku walked past the two genin, she said with a sad tone in her voice, if you two were there for him, he wouldn't have met me in the forest that day, he wouldn't have fallen in love with me, he wouldn't have taken Kakashi's technique for me, he wouldn't have died for me, his enemy. Haku still couldn't shake the intense guilt that filled her heart when her mind thought back to his death. Haku quickly shook her head and opened her mouth to say something, but Han's voice was heard instead. So this is where you went, I knew you would come here to join your friends. Haku turned around to see Han standing a few feet away from them, his right hand hanging from his gi as he chuckled softly. What no one noticed was that there were little balls of orange light floating up from the waters below and into the air around them. Haku instantly got on guard and pulled out several senbon and said, I was hoping to not be here, but things had to be discussed. Han nodded in understanding, his hand sliding out of his gi as he said, understandable, but that doesn't mean you can run off after wanting your death. Haku turned her head to Sasuke and Sakura and exclaimed, take Zabuza and Kakashi away from here. I will buy some time for you both to go. Sakura and Sasuke looked at each other and quickly nodded before the two made their way to follow Haku's orders. Although the latter of the two wanted to stay behind, he knew from the large amount of chakra this enemy had, he wouldn't stand a chance. As Sasuke and Sakura lifted up their respective choices, Han rubbed his wrist and shouted, who said I'm letting any of you escape? Futon. Kairaki Muso, which caused a large amount of steam to explode from his body before it began to spread out around the area. Futon. Gekuretsu Gobi Bakushin. Boiling style. Furious five-tailed dash. Han shouted as the large amount of steam around him morphed into a being that had a horse's body with a dolphin's head, which had two long horns with three short horns on its head along with five tails swishing behind it. Haku, Sasuke, and Sakura stared at the steam-made creature in horror as its eyes glowed a bright red before it roared and charged towards them, but as it got closer, the small orange balls of light that were hovering around the bridge shot towards the spot that was before Haku and the Konoha shinobi. In second, the orbs landed on the bridge, and a large vortex of fire ignited against the ground, causing the creature of steam to disperse back into Han, who crashed against the ground hard. Meanwhile, Haku, Sasuke, and Sakura were sent sailing backward to the ground as well. After a few seconds, Haku slowly made her way to her feet as she stared into the inferno and noticed that something was forming from within it. The flames intensified as a black silhouette of a human was shown materializing from the start of the left side of the body to the right, and from what she could tell, the figure was standing at 5 feet 6 feet and the silhouette of the hair seemed long and spiky as well. The Tower of Inferno began to lower and ebb away, and once it did, Haku received a shock that made her audible gasp. The first thing she saw was that familiar navy blue and neon orange jumpsuit that was worn on Naruto and even had the Konoha Hide Ite around his forehead. The jumpsuit even had a large hole in the jacket and shirt where he was struck. Haku looked at the face and saw the familiar tan skin, ocean blue eyes, and the 3 whisker marks on both cheeks, but the hair, while it was moderately spiky, it had grown into a low ponytail that fell between his shoulder blades. The figure was also far taller than he was before, and the jumpsuit looked tighter on him as well. She could see through the large hole in his shirt that he had more muscle than before, and even the baby fat that was previously on his face was gone, leaving it smoother and sharper as well. But despite the changes, she could see the person she had fallen in love with during the past few weeks in wave within this new image. Are you okay? The male asked, his voice sounding a little rough and deep to her but still holding the familiarity that she was used to. Sasuke and Sakura were seeing this as well, and they had a look of pure shock on their faces. It can't be, can it? Sasuke whispered in disbelief. It couldn't be the dope. Kakashi and Haku had said he had died, and their voices rang the truth, and yet he was there, and he looked different as well. Sakura was in a similar boat as Sasuke as she stared at the new arrival, her thoughts ranging from shock to relief and happiness. When Kakashi had told them that Naruto had died, Sakura couldn't stop the guilt from pouring into her heart, and it had only gotten worse with Haku's own words. She had treated him so horribly throughout their entire life when all he wanted was a friend. She thought that she would never get the chance to apologize, but now that he was back, she could make up for all of the evil she had done to him. Sakura then allowed a small blush to form on her face when she realized how cute he was looking as well. Why Haku shuddered out, tears falling down her blood-covered cheeks as she sat there on the ground for a few moments before she leapt up and hugged him tightly, her sobs muffled due to her face hiding against his jacket. The teen gave her a tender smile and said, "Sorry it took so long. A hero usually comes at the nick of time." Haku giggled tearfully against him and tightened her hold around his neck. She didn't care that they were in the middle of a mission, and she didn't care that her enemy was still standing. All she cared about was that Naruto was alive. She could feel Naruto push her away as gently as possible as he whispered, "This reunion, as wonderful as it is, needs to wait. I have some business to handle. Stand down until it's over." Haku immediately shook her head and shouted, "I refuse. I don't know how you came back to life, but I will not leave you alone to face him. Kakashi-san, Zabuza-san, and I weren't able to defeat him, and it was three of us." Naruto shook his head, turned away from her, and firmly said, "Trust me. I will not die again. Just stay put. This won't last long." Haku stared at his back, clearly distressed at wanting to stay by his side, but she understood why he needed her to leave. Despite his best wishes, she nodded her head and said, "Please Naruto-kun, stay safe," before she ran to Sasuke and Sakura, hoping that he knew what he was doing and that he would stay safe. For her. Village of Wave. Uzumaki Naruto vs Joki no Oni. "So, you finally decide to realize that you are interfering in my business." Naruto turned his head to glance at Han. The warm look in his eye that was there for Haku was completely replaced by a cold fury that no one could match. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, fire embers beginning to float around him slowly. "On second thought, I don't need to know the name of a dead man." The man before him laughed at his words, causing his frown to deepen and his eyes to darken dangerously. Such words for a child who does not understand that they are moments away from certain death. "I am Joki no Oni, Han. As I said, I don't need to know the name of a dead man," Naruto responded before an aura of hellfire covered his being, his eyes now glowing a fiery orange. Han laughed at this and immediately charged at Naruto at top speed. His right arm coasted back, but the second Han came close, Naruto's body vanished in flames and ashes, leaving Han to punch said ashes. Naruto swiftly appeared behind Han and threw a right, flame-covered fist that slammed at the base of Han's spine hard enough for the armor to crack. Han quickly turned around to throw a steam-covered punch, but Naruto dodged it and delivered a hard right jab to his face before leaning forward to land a left uppercut with flames covering his left hand, sending Han shooting into the air and to the ground moments later. Naruto let a cruel smirk appear on his face as he reared his right arm back, waiting for Han to stand up, and the minute he did, Naruto lunged his right arm forward, and a thick strand of hellfire shot out from his wrist and towards Han, with the end of the hellfire shaped like a kunai. Seeing this, Han quickly shouted, "Futon, Joki Domu." Steam shot out from his armor, and once again, the steam warped into a dome, but the stream of hellfire shot straight through the dome as if the dome didn't exist and slammed into Han's armored chest. Han was stunned by this. That wasn't possible. Nothing could go within his Joki Domu, nothing, but somehow, this had not only done just that, but it went through his armor. He could even feel the hot steel stabbing within his ribcage, and had he not worn the armor, it would have pierced his heart, killing him. The flames quickly cooled down and faded away, revealing a silver chain that Naruto was now holding in his hand. Naruto gripped the end of the chain with one hand while wrapping his free hand in front of the chain and pulled on the chain hard as he yelled, "Get over here." Han's feet scraped against the ground hard before he was finally pulled forward towards Naruto, and the minute he came in reach, Naruto's feet exploded into fire. Naruto performed a back flip just as the chain disappeared and nailed Han hard under the chin and completely breaking his mask in the front of his armor, sending the steam user flipping backward in unison with Naruto, with the only exception of Naruto landing on his feet while Han slammed down on his back. Naruto watched as Han looked up and rolled back on his feet before dashing back, obviously trying to gain some distance from his opponent, but Naruto instantly lunged his left hand out and the same stream of hellfire came flying out of his wrist and towards Han. This time, Han managed to avoid being struck by it and launched himself towards Naruto with a shout of, "Futon! Joki Juden!" Naruto watched as the steam bullet came charging for him, and instead of moving, Naruto ignited the Hellfire in his hand and summoned more of it to wrap around his body. Naruto quickly dashed forward with his fist coast back, and just as he got close, he moved his arm forward, and immediately, the two forces collided. The clash seemed to last a lifetime compared to several seconds until the steam began to ebb away, leaving Naruto's fist to collide against Han's armored fist, which immediately shattered upon impact, breaking every bone from Han's hand to his elbow. Han's eyes widened in agony as the flame-covered fist left his broken hand and came inches towards his face, but Han quickly switched himself out with a small brick, causing Naruto's hand to shatter that completely. Naruto's face morphed into a look of annoyance as he lowered his right hand and placed it somewhat behind his back as Han appeared a few feet away, his left hand bleeding and bruised. Han clutched his left hand and stared at the small teen with a look akin to shock. This surely was a joke. He had to have been. His armor couldn't have been ripped in half by a basic move like that. His armored mask couldn't have shattered from a move like that. And his hand shouldn't be broken at all by this. This wasn't right at all. What the hell was going on? Village of Wave. Pav. General. Haku couldn't believe what she was seeing. Naruto had not been alive for less than 10 minutes and he was doing more damage than she, Kakashi, and Zabuza combined. What the hell had happened to him? You look shocked, Haku-san, Sakura stated as she stared at the Hyoten user in concern. I am. Naruto-kun is doing so much damage to him and even bypassed his attacks, Haku replied with a stunned look on her face. You act as if this is a miracle or something, Sasuke told her, albeit also surprised due to the skills Naruto was showing. Before seeing all of this, all Sasuke knew of Naruto was that he made tons of clones and had a huge amount of chakra, but now, apparently, things were hidden from them all. Did Kakashi know about his skills? It is, Zabuza-san, Kakashi-san, and I fought against him for an endless amount of time and yet we never damaged him like this. We couldn't bypass his steam either and yet Naruto-kun was able to do it without any difficulty, Haku explained, shocking both Konoha shinobi silent. Whoa. I didn't know Naruto was so strong, Sakura said with a look towards her blonde teammate, who was currently engaged in a fierce stare down with that other shinobi. Cha, he is truly whooping that ass. You take him down, Naruto, and show him who is the boss. Inner Sakura shouted as she punched the air, making the real Sakura sigh a bit. Village of Wave. Uzumaki Naruto vs Joki no Oni. How is this possible? Han asked, completely in awe as he felt the cold air of Wave hit his exposed and wounded chest. No Kaden jutsu could have ever broken through my defenses. Not my jutsus and not my armor. What the hell is this? Naruto narrowed eyes and gave a rather cruel smirk. That's the thing about my techniques, they aren't Kaden jutsus, and to make it better, my attacks are no ordinary flame either. This is the power of the Netherrealm's Hellfire and I have not been able to use it in some time. The Netherrealm? Han questioned. Yes, and unfortunately for you, dead man, you are my test subject to see how powerful it has become. Naruto let out a rather demonic laugh as he ignited the Hellfire within his left hand and around his body. Han could see the flames swarm around the young man and smirked. For the third time in his entire life, Han had felt an emotion that he hadn't imagined he would feel again. Excitement. Han chuckled loudly at the youth and said, well, this is a new twist. I had you pegged as a lowly genin and yet I was wrong, your abilities show much more than that. Han chuckled again. But I'm afraid you won't be able to test these skills on me. Naruto's eyes narrowed. You do not seem to understand, Naruto hissed as the embers floating around him started to grow larger. You have no say in this. Han merely smirked and said, I believe I do. I have other things to do than to die. Especially by the hand of someone as young as you. Naruto could only sneer at the disrespectful tone Han had shown him and replied, do not let my youth fool you. I've defeated warriors stronger than you, boy. Han growled and took a step forward, only to hear Gato's voice coming from behind him. Han, I did not pay you to play around with a child. Get to work and kill Tazuna. The fire around Naruto's body exploded violently when he gazed upon the small elderly small male and his army of henchmen. So that is Gato, He's as disgusting as Tazuna described, Naruto thought. Han turned to Gato and replied, this is no mere child. He was able to cut through my steam as if it was nothing. That matters not, Han. I paid you to kill these pesky shinobi and to kill Tazuna. If you cannot kill a mere child, you are not worth your payment. Gato screamed, his face turning red at the amount of rage that he was feeling. Han was going to respond to his employer's anger when Naruto suddenly said, Gato, the same Gato that is responsible for Wave being like this, it is about time you showed your face. Naruto watched as the hideous man looked at him and with a proud tone, he said, I am the very same. Not that I am surprised that you wouldn't know the savior of this pathetic place. A burst of dark laughter left Naruto's lips, his anger all going towards Gato himself. Then on behalf of this pathetic place, there is a debt that you owe and I'm looking to collect. A debt that I owe to this place. How foolish of you to presume that I owe any debt to this worthless village. Gato exclaimed as Naruto remained silent as if buying his time before he struck. I don't think you know who I am, child. I am Gato, king of the underworld, and I have connections in every location in the entire world. I have, can, and will buy as many villages as use up all the resources a please to get what I desire, and no one, man or child, is going to stop me. Gato boasted loudly before he turned to Han and said, and as for you, you will go there and kill this insolent worm and his friends, get that ice whore and kill Tazuna. Do you understand? Han narrowed his eyes at the man and said, listen up, you sniveling fool, the only reason I am here is because I wanted to fight Momochi Zabuza. I have defeated him and Hatake Kakashi to boot. I wanted to finish this mission to get my pay and go home, but listening to you boast like an idiot and speak down to me as if I was one of your pathetic little henchmen has crossed the line. I am finished. Our deal is off. I'm going home. What? Gato exclaimed in horror as Han began to walk away from Gato and toward Naruto himself. You can't do this. Gato screamed, but Han continued to ignore him until he came up face to face with Naruto, who scowled up at him. You and I, on the other hand, are far from over, Han stated as he narrowed his eyes at the blonde shinobi before he smirked and said, I heard the Hyoten user call you Naruto. Knowing your name and knowing you come from Konoha, I will find you and we will finish this. Han then leaned down and whispered into the blonde's ear, and when we do meet, I will introduce you to my demon, Kokuo. And with those words, Han leaned up and walked past Naruto and past the ground, but Han did take time to nod and smirk and Haku, who scowled in return. Naruto watched Han leave from the corner of his head and shook his head at the cowardice of Han but decided to let him go for now. Besides, he had a debt to fulfill with the loud-mouthed midget that was currently running his mouth in front of his army. I cannot believe this. The nerve of that pathetic swine to walk away when I paid him the money. No matter. I will still destroy this village with my men. Gato shouted at the shinobi before he turned to his army and said, I will pay everyone double for the death of every single man, woman, and child that is killed. The men roared in approval at this, but Gato wasn't done yet. And I will pay quadruple for anyone that gives me the heads of these shinobi that stand in my way. Gato roared to the army, who roared as well, readying themselves for battle. Gato grinned evilly and turned around with his mouth open, ready to sprout out some more words, but then the sound of gargling reached the ears of everyone in attendance. Naruto smirked as he looked at the shocked look on Gato's face. His spear was now inside Gato's mouth and his kunai was sticking out of the back of Gato's head. You talk too much, Gato, Naruto said with a dark laugh. Come here. With a hard tug, Gato's head was cruelly ripped off of his body and was sent flying into Naruto's left hand, and once Naruto got a good grip of the head, the chain disappeared with flames. Naruto watched as the headless body fell to the ground and blood began to pool from the neck. Naruto glanced down at the stunned look on the now dead man's face and said, Your debt has been repaid. Naruto tossed the head down to the ground and eyed the army, who were spooked beyond belief, and with a smirk, Naruto asked, What is wrong? You all were prepared to kill us moments before. What changed? The men looked at each other in fear, but a random male, wearing a police uniform, said, I don't know about you guys, but he's only one kid. We can take him. Another guy, also wearing a police uniform, said, Yeah, but I don't want to end up like Gato, I'd rather just surrender. The first man scoffed and said, Such a puss. I'm not afraid of this runt. He can't kill us all. Some of the men on the right of the first uniformed male roared in agreement while the second half seemed afraid to even hold their weapons. The first uniformed man scoffed at the cowardice of the rest and looked at the 20 men that agreed with him and said, "Now let's kill this runt, for the boss." The 20 men roared and together with their leader, they all charged towards Naruto, who merely smirked. Without warning, over 50 clones of Naruto appeared with a burst of fire, causing the 20 men to skid to a stop immediately. The first uniformed man stopped as well as every single one of Naruto's clones, and all of them wore a rather evil smirk on their faces. "So, the true Naruto said with an amused grin on his face. "Still want to try your luck?" The 20 men, along with the uniformed man, dropped their weapons and held up their hands, along with the 20 other men as well. "We surrender." Naruto laughed softly and said, "I thought so. Thanks for listening. In the next part. In the meantime, please leave a review, I would love to hear your feedback. Especially if it helps me improve the overall story.